Hey everybody, it's Master Galengeist here, bringing you my review for the book Dune. And I was reading this because I saw there was going to be a movie, and I kind of wanted to see what it was about and kind of get an idea of how the work is and how kind of hard it would be to kind of translate. Also, I'm into sci-fi and fantasy and all that, and I just wanted to read it because everybody's like talked about Dune, and I'm glad I did read it because an interesting thing kind of happened in that I enjoyed reading this book, but I don't like it. I don't hate it either. I don't think it's bad, but there are just some things that I'm just like, okay, this is kind of weird and strange. And I can understand why it's very hard to adapt. So, the basic premise of there's no real basic premise of Dune. It's basically kind of like Game of Thrones in space. And I know that's kind of a weird thing to kind of say, mainly because the book has been out since like the 1960s, and Game of Thrones is a much more kind of recent phenomenon, but there's a lot of political stuff going on, ecological stuff, religious stuff. There's a lot of different kind of things, so trying to get into it, this is like humanity in the far-flung future. They have moved to settling different kind of planets and everything, but it is done down into a kind of feudalistic fiefdom between various different kind of great houses and factions, led by an emperor of like the Imperium. And of course there's all different kinds of etiquette things and everything, a caste system and all that. And it's like, okay, that's kind of interesting. Well, one of the biggest and kind of interesting aspects of it is their reliance on just a certain level of technology, because there's thinking machines tried to enslave the human race, and the human race was like, ah, shit, fuck that. And we're able to kind of like beat them back, so like, no thinking machines. So AIs and kind of like advanced kind of thinking computing, that doesn't really fly. Instead, they use this thing called spice, and use it to kind of like augment their kind of cognitive abilities. We get mentats, which are kind of like computers, and then we got like the spacing guilds able to pretty much navigate space. Though it would have been kind of nice to get kind of more of an explanation on certain things with that, because the spice is like a thing that is like ubiquitous throughout the empire. Now, granted, mainly the rich have it, and it like does all these kind of things. It's like the super kind of drug, and there's only one kind of place that produces it, the planet Arrakis. And excuse me for like when I get into kind of like names and places and shit, I'm gonna butcher the pronunciation of a lot of this shit, but it's there's a lot. That's one of my things, is that I do like that there's a lot of different kind of terminology, but it gets to a point where like, I gotta look up a lot of different stuff. You gotta look into the back of the book to see what if that's part of the terminology that's defined there. If it's some kind of word that's being used kind of like as a verb or like a noun for something, you're kind of like, ah. So it kind of takes you out a little bit, but it kind of also brings you in sometimes, because you're like, oh, okay, now I get this and understand this. So we've got Arrakis, and this is where the spice is. So whoever controls this pretty much controls the Empire. Now, granted, you'd still have to watch out for certain shit, but yeah. It was with the Harkonnens. But then the Emperor's like, nah, we're going to give this to the Atreides family, so we then get introduced to them with Duke Leto, and the Harkonnens, their leader is a Baron. I'm not sure what the complete differences are, but they're pretty much on as equal a footing as they can be, and they've even got kind of like a feud thing going, which it would have been nice to get a little bit more background on that, but suffice it to say, when the shit starts kicking off, it's just like, they're just fucking with each other. Alright. So, we get introduced to, like, of course, Leto, his concubine, mistress lady, Lady Jessica, who was with the Bene Gesserit? I don't know. She was pretty much tasked with producing a daughter for the Duke, but instead produced a son. And there is a breeding program with the Bene Gesserit that they're trying to get the, here we go, Kizach Haderach? The KH. Alright? The BG and the KH. I might do that to, like, make that a little bit easier on myself during this, but they're trying to create this super Uberman kind of person because they've got race consciousness. Like, they can see, like, pretty much the female part of the human race, but they can't go to the male part, so that's why they need that male dude to be able to see all of it and kind of, like, shorten the way and pretty much, like, help humanity kind of, like, get out of this kind of stagnative phase. And again, I would like a little bit more depth on that. It's kind of interesting setting up this kind of thing, and it reminds me kind of like the Wheel of Time of the kind of differences that we've got with, like, the Aes Sedai and, like, what was going on with the Ashaman and male channelers. So it's like, okay, so they're doing back and forth kind of stuff, and they evidently do super uber training for, like, ass kicking and shit. And they're not really assassins, but if an assassin came to fuck with them, that would be a pretty bad fucking idea. Let's see. How do we want to go with them? So that's their kind of thing. And to do that, they also kind of, like, influence religion. They, like, send agents out to kind of make it so that way if a BG gets stuck... Jesus, it sounds like I'm saying a disco Bee Gees person gets stuck. And now I have just imagined a world where instead of weirding ninja women, we got the Bee Gees doing it. That's fucking weird. But they essentially pretty much seed superstitions and religious shit into various different kind of cultures, so that way if one of their agents gets like, oh fuck, foobar situation, they're able to be like, so this is kind of what you guys believe, here's this sign, here's that sign, wow, like that. And this is important because in the Imperium, they follow this Orange Catholic Bible, which is kind of an amalgamation of all the different kind of, like, religious things in humanity. It's like, okay, that's an interesting kind of thing. It would be kind of cool for that to kind of happen, but it would be kind of hard to figure out how that would work. It's like, okay, this is important because it's in a political kind of thing. The Duke keeps himself not married, so that way if he gets into a position that he needs a political marriage, he can still do that, but he's still with the woman he loves. So she produced Paul Atreides, who's pretty much the main kind of anchor character that we follow. And he's 15. He gets tested by, like, the Reverend Mother, who's, like, one of the head of the Bee Gees. I'm really going to regret this. But she tests him with this kind of thing to see if he would take his hand out from this box that's giving him pain and all that. But he's able to pass the test. And one of the things you start seeing early is this is an interesting book that kind of tells this story, but we also get inside characters' heads. But the issue is you don't know which character's head you're in until you get to the end of it, so you're going back and forth sometimes being like, whose head am I in? What's going on? So the Atreides are usually associated with the world of Caladan, and they, of course, are moving to Arrakis, and they're like, alright, cool, let's kind of do this. So we also kind of get set up where we see who trains Paul, like this musical troubadour kind of dude, Gurney Halleck, who's kind of like this scarred, weird dude that's got a balisette that he, like, fucking plays like a boss, and talks about poems and shit like that. He's really that kind of interesting kind of character. I'm like, alright, cool. Duncan Idaho helps to train him. His father, of course, tries to train him in the arts of politics and strategy and everything like that. And the thing is, this then leads to two of my criticisms of, like, action scenes. Now, granted, like, big action scenes don't happen until later on in the book. They're not really that engaging or that really kind of fun to follow. I've read other books that have been like, okay, cool, yeah. And then this thing of being kind of told more than shown. And I know it's a book, and they pretty much have to tell you shit. But it's like, they keep saying that they have plans within plans, and I'm like, Are we sure about that? Because it's, I mean, we do see kind of certain different kind of political plays and different kind of tactics used to kind of like fuck some shit up, but it's more like we're told constantly that it's that all there are these plans within plans rather than seeing like reverses and double shit going on. It's just like, oh, that happened. All right. Another character, Thufir Hawat. I'm just gonna fucking butcher this shit. He's kind of like the master assassin that also helps to train Paul as well in like assassination tactics, because everybody in the Empire pretty much doesn't really trust anybody else, and poison is like the name of the game for certain shit. We also get Dr. Yue, who is like the main kind of traitor dude. He was like fucked over by the Harkonnens, but he's trying to get as close to the Baron as possible to fuck him over, so he's gonna fuck over Leto to try and get that, because they like killed his wife. Yeah. We don't learn that until like Arrakis shit goes down. So we see him kind of get there. It's a desert planet, kind of like Tatooine, except there's like giant sandworms, and it's really kind of weird. We do go kind of in depth with like Arrakis's like kind of like ecological things going on, because since it's a desert planet, moisture is of paramount concern. I just kind of wanted sometimes maybe a little bit more in depth of like what they were going to try and do to like get their kind of terraforming thing going on, because the native race there, the Fremen, they wear these still suits where all of their moisture is pretty much recycled and everything. They recycle the water of their dead. But like this planetologist from the Empire pretty much was very into their stuff. Well, granted, he was also one of them because his father had relations with the Fremen, and was trying to pretty much help institute this whole kind of thing to kind of get Arrakis into a better kind of ecological state with regards to moisture. And the thing is, the Fremen are very tough. Since they've been pretty much born in this crucible of pretty much perpetual kind of misery, they're like hardened combatants, and the Harkonnens are trying to kind of like fuck them up and thinks that they've pretty much like wiped them all out. It's like, nah, they hide and they're able to fucking do shit in the desert because the deserts are shit. And they're of course are trying to like do the whole stuff with the spice and all that. It's like, alright, cool. We see later trying to do everything, trying to get in their good graces. We see that there was an assassination attempt on Paul, and that suspicion was then put onto Jessica. Thufir thinks it's her. Leto pretty much lets that play on, so that way the Harkonnens don't know that they're onto him. But they kind of go at that, trying to learn what's going on with the culture before, of course, Dr. Yue kind of strikes, kind of like takes out some of the people that are important and like knocks out the Duke and be like, hey, dude, take this poison tooth capsule, put it in there, and fucking take out the Baron that way, my dude. I mean, I don't like doing this, but fuck that. I need to take this dude out, because he's going to kill me after this is all done. And then, of course, they get all kind of screwed up. Paul and Jessica are able to escape, though Duncan sacrifices himself to do that. They do get taken by the Fremen, and we do see them kind of adapt to their ways and culture and everything, which I kind of wish we had more on, because sometimes we go and we see what the Baron's doing on his rolling planet. We see him setting up with trying to get Fayed Rautha, I think. Again, I'm sorry, I know I'm mispronouncing, but he's trying to get this dude to pretty much be his successor, and also eventually the one to be on the throne. And he, of course, was working with the Emperor, and who sent his elite guard to go and take care of shit. Now, granted, we also get the kind of information that this elite guard is more riding on its coattails, because they start fighting the Fremen, and the Fremen are like, eat my ass! And they're like, shit, that's a lot of ass! And they get booty clapped a couple times, where, like, they might get, like, one or two Fremen, and the Sardaukar, the Emperor's elite group pretty much loses, like, a lot more than that. So it's like, okay, they are not fucking around. And We also see some other kind of technologies, like usually they would have shields or whatnot, but on Arrakis you can't use that because the sandworms are like, eat me, motherfucker! And they come and they eat your ass. And that's like, no. You don't kind of want to do that because these fuckers are big. And I'm not just talking like, fuck. Like, this fucker's as big as a bus. That's a big small one. I'm talking like huge El Gigante motherfuckers that you can ride a while. Because the Fremen do that shit and they're like, yeah, watch me as I drift. Well, they would if they had any... Since living on Arrakis, they don't really get that kind of like swaggy. You know what I mean? That's like, oh. So, Paul and Jessica pretty much get into the Fremen society. One of the Fremen is just like, fuck off! And Paul's like, fine then, we'll fight. And this is an important thing because he had started getting more kind of premonitions and everything. Being able to see the future and the past and all that. We see it kind of like awakening because he's of course being able to take in more spice because it's everywhere on the fucking planet. Food, air, shit like that. And I really am intrigued by how the author kind of like works in this level of prescience because it's not exactly fate, but it's not like he can there's a lot of room for him to kind of like change things because we see him kind of like going through his transitions and his transformations into like pretty much the prophet figure of Muad'Dib, and we see him trying to like grasp with it and try and be able to like be anchored and understand what's going on in the flow of time, which seeing time like he does in the book is really kind of hard. It's like, okay, I really like messing with that concept of space and time. And the thing is, he's seen this thing of this jihad, this holy war that the Fremen do in kind of his honor, and seeing him trying to fight against that fate and to stop that kind of giant destructive holy war is a kind of big conflict. It's like, holy shit, he's trying to, because this dude tries to fucking pretty much fight him to the death, but Paul kills him and it's his first kill and he doesn't like it, but it starts precipitating his kind of legend because he starts crying for him and he's giving moisture to the dead. That's an important thing in the Fremen society, and of course, since Jessica is a BG and this is the son, there's this stuff kind of put in with the whole KH thing going on, and they think that they're the version of that, and I'm like, holy shit. And an important bit is that Jessica is also pregnant with Duke Leto's daughter. It's like, oh shit, we're going to have to see how that works out. So they're kind of getting into there, getting ingrained. We see that the Duke tries to poison the Baron, but is unsuccessful, kills his Mentat, but he is able to get Thufir captured and poison him, but still give him the antidote and keep him on his payroll, like, as he is training up his successor. That stuff was kind of interesting, but I almost rather would have just... I know we need more stuff on their perspective, but some of the stuff that we'd seen, like Arautha fighting in a slave, fighting a gladiator to kind of like set up his own legend. I know they're kind of juxtaposing it for Paul, but I think a better kind of rivalry kind of thing would have been his ascendance to the top of the Fremen society versus kind of the Emperor more, and more just the Baron Harkonnen. It's like, alright. Okay. So, he's going through with all this stuff. We see that Jessica's pretty much only going to be allowed as a Reverend Mother because their Reverend Mother's old. But the thing is, she takes this water of life that transforms her and gives her better abilities. She's able to pretty much change chemical compositions and shit. But the thing is, it also changes her kid. And the kid's able, because you're able to get all that kind of race consciousness and memories and shit. And of course, this is a baby inside of her that's not even fully formed. It's like, the fuck is this? Which is really kind of weird because when the kid's born, it's like a 4-year-old. And it's a freaky ass kind of kid. And I could almost say that we don't need her in the story whatsoever. The only kind of important bit she does is that she kills the Baron Harkonnen, and we learned that Jessica's is the daughter of Baron Harkonnen, and that Paul is like the amalgamation of the Atreides and the Harkonnens. Same with Alaya, his sister when she's born, and I'm just like, oh, okay. It's really kind of weird because I would have thought that like some other characters would have done a better job doing the whole kind of thing at the end that we get. So we then kind of see them kind of doing their battle tactics and learning what they need to do, pretty much terraforming wise, that the Kynes dude wanted to do. He gets killed pretty much by in the desert because they leave him without a still suit after the Harkonnen attack. So yeah, it kind of putters along for a little bit as they're trying to figure out what's going on. Paul gets together with Chani. Chani? Chani. One of the Fremen. They have a kid, Leto. The thing is, I don't mind their relationship. I just didn't feel anything for it. I mean, they say they love each other, and they do these little things, but I just didn't care about it. Not that it's horrible or bad or no good. Not like he took her on top of a sandworm and fucking like, I'm king of the world, or like frickin' like smacks her around or anything. It's just, it felt kind of empty to me. I'm not saying it's bad or anything. If you are able to kind of like feel their relationship, that's cool. I'm not taking that away from you. That's cool. Alright? I just didn't feel it. And I'm just like, alright, cool. So they're pretty much getting ready to like fuck with their shit because Paul decided to try and go KH, and he decided to drink the water of life, and he was like pretty much out for like 3 weeks. I'm like, yeah, I can do this shit now. So he's like better, and of course his eyes are blue and all that, and the whole things with that with the spice. And well, since they're pretty able to kind of threaten the spice supply, the Baron and the Emperor are like, let's fucking stop this shit, because the Baron had pretty much taken out the Duke and decided to install his one cousin, Raban, to pretty much be Dick Cheese #1. And pretty much oppress Arrakis to the point where it'd be like iron-fisted, and then he would put in his successor, and he'd be like, yeah, cool, yeah, party time, party time, party time, party time, party time, yeah. And everything would be better. And then that would, of course, set him up to be Emperor. But since they're like losing a lot of shit, people are getting like fucked up. It's like, no, we need to fucking do this. And the thing is, we never really see that shit happen. We're kind of told in passing that they're taking on villagers, they're like doing weird and oppressive stuff, but we never really get enough of a view of that. We just hear it in the background or are told that it's going on. Alright, cool. But evidently it gets to such a shit-kicking degree that the Emperor's like, I'm gonna fucking get myself back into this thing and fucking figure out what's going on. Take out this Muad'Dib and all that shit. And that's when they start putting their plans in motion. They pretty much get into a position where they're at the main city, Arrakeen. We got that the Emperor built himself a giant metal hut thing. The Baron Harkonnen's there, and the thing is, they've got conventions of not using atomics against humans, but Paul's able to pretty much get one and use it to blast open the wall and like use the sandworms and everything to kind of like fuck their shit up. And this is, of course, there's a final kind of battle for this, for the control of Arrakis, but again, it's just not that exciting. It kind of just happens, and you're like, okay, alright. It's not horrendous, and it's not like it's like bloody or gory for the sake of bloody or gory, or just being like physical impossibilities or anything. It's just like I need more kind of information on certain things to get that kind of flow and everything, and it's just like, alright, cool. It's really weird in that like certain things get more details than others, and I'm like, I kind of would have preferred these other details than this. But they're able to pretty much force a stalemate, and not stalemate, but like take them out. We see that Alaya Alaya, takes out the Baron because they captured her and killed Paul's son Leto, the baby. Even though I was almost like, did they kill the baby? It was really kind of weird because it's just like they told us they killed the baby, but that's about it. Nobody really, not even the Emperor or the Sardaukar were like, yeah, we killed that kid. It's like, alright. The Emperor was pretty much doing an audience and trying, what are we gonna fucking do here? And Baron's like, I don't fucking know. Let me try to figure out, man. But, of course, Alaya came in and was like, I'm a freaky 4-year-old child that'll pretty much verbally fuck you up in the face. And the fucking Reverend Mother, who pretty much had tested Paul's like, abomination! And I'm just like, alright, but, like, what is this kid adding? I'm like, alright, she killed the Baron. I almost would have rather had that the Baron lived to a certain point where we get to a point where the whole Rautha thing's going on and Paul fights him or whatnot, and then the Baron's like, fuck that shit, and then Gurney Halleck like fights him or whatnot, they both die or whatnot. I'm like, alright, it would have been just made more sense for Gurney to like take his ass out. But the Emperor then pretty much gets trapped. Paul gets back into the house that they used to have and is pretty much trying to figure out that needle path to like stop the whole jihad thing from going on, but he's like, alright, let's try and fucking figure this out. Let's see, we see that one of the characters, Count Fenring, who's been in the background and pretty much used by the Emperor to do his dirty deeds, is like a failed KH kind of thing. Paul's able to figure that out, but he's like, alright, you guys stand back. He tries to pretty much work out a deal with the Emperor to pretty much marry the daughter, pretty much doing a kind of same thing as Leto would have done, except he wouldn't probably produce any heirs, but just would marry her for the throne. She, of course, is trained as the BG as well. Shana's like, I'll step aside, but he's like, no, I love you, stay here, we're good. This is the convenience one, where I ain't gonna do shit. But of course, Rouse is like, yeah, screw this, and it's like, alright, we're fucking fighting. And then we get the usual kind of fight scene. Paul's able to take his ass out, having to deal with like poison and shit like that, because he's a stupid squirrely little fucknut. And then they're pretty much end there, trying to figure out what's going on to go on with the Imperium. And granted, I understand there's other books and everything, but I really don't have any inclination to kind of go further with this. Not that it's like a horrible kind of thing, it's just really not for me. It's kind of more of a depressive, kind of pessimistic kind of take on certain things. I'm like, but granted, the kind of time frame of like the stagnation of humanity and trying to figure out what's going on and how to kind of like best walk the path, that's interesting and intriguing, but I just kind of need a little bit different kind of like vibrancy. Not that this is bad, it's just really not for me. Though I did enjoy going through and seeing a different kind of author's kind of style with how this was, and that there was a lot of different and interesting kind of ideas. Definitely going into the ecology of Arrakis and all that, and how a kind of giant far-flung civilization of humanity could potentially get, even with technology, into a feudalistic kind of society that would do some weird-ass shit. And also, what would take the kind, if you did get to a technological point where you would get AI and they're like, eat me! And you're like, no, no, no! And then you kind of like stop that, how you would be able to kind of evolve past that. It's like, oh, okay, biologically. So, that's kind of a cool kind of exploration that I like. But I really didn't get really sucked in with any of the characters. So that, I do kind of need some characters that I'm like able to kind of like get into and identify with. And here I just really couldn't. Not that I couldn't get into their heads and understand what they were doing. I just wasn't excited to read about them. Or, not excited to read about them. I was kind of excited, but like, it didn't pull my interest completely. I'm like, oh, okay. That's kind of interesting. Alright, cool. Alright. You know what I mean? It's where you're seeing a character and you're like, nah. It's really weird. Usually it's easier if I'm like, I really like this character and can really identify with him, or I fucking hate this motherfucker and he's an asshole and he needs to go get fucked. And that's more of the Baron and more his coterie and the Emperor, and I'm able to like identify like I understand Paul, I understand Leto and Jessica and Gurney and Duncan Idaho and all that. Well, not really Duncan that much because he really wasn't in it as much as I thought he would be. Gurney was in it more. I get through Fear and their kind of whole thing with the their loyalty to Leto Atreides and how he handled himself as a duke. Like, I get those kind of things. I just wasn't completely connected with him. It's just that little bit where you're like, okay, I'm interested in seeing what happens with this character, but I'm just not that interested to be like, oh, okay, I like this character. You know what I mean? I know, that's kind of a weird kind of way to go with it. So, I am glad I read this. I kind of want to see how the movie is going to be and how it's going to be kind of divided up. If you're into sci-fi and you want to check this book out, I would definitely go for it. It's a different kind of take and all that, but I'd set yourself if you're like, okay, get into a couple pages and see if the prose is for you, if the writing style is for you, because just like all different kinds of medium, some stuff's not for people. Like, even though I love the way Tolkien does The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, no, not a lot of, there's some people that don't like how his prose flows and how he writes his stuff, and I get that. That doesn't make you bad, that doesn't make him bad. It's just not you. That's kind of how I feel about this book. I don't hate it. I don't think it's horrible. There's things that I would rather have had like changed up or whatnot, or like that's not as good as it is. But I can see why it's considered a masterpiece and a very important part of the sci-fi genre of writing. So, yeah, that's pretty much what I think there. It's like, yeah, it's a very interesting book because it challenged me in a way of like, okay, I enjoyed this, but I didn't like it. That kind of middle ground of I read something and it's not that I hate it or I dislike it or I'm like, oh, this is bad. It's just not for me. So those are my opinions on the book. Tell me what you guys think in the comments below. If you liked it, if you didn't like it, if you agree with me, if you disagree with me. Also like and subscribe, and I hope you have a good day.